Good evening, everyone. And I want to welcome you to this virtual space, our monthly Wednesday evening lecture. And it's my sincere delight to welcome you into this space of my office. The sun just set over the Santa Monica Mountains over there. And you can see I have a little reminder of the Himalayas in back, as well as a yantra created by one of our graduating classes that honors that blessed relationship between Shiva and Shakti, between Purusha and Prakriti, between our activity and awareness. And we're really honored this evening to welcome Professor Staneshwar Timilsina. And if we examine that first name, Ishwar, of course, the Lord, Stan, stand, standing, being. So the Lord of being is with us, and he will expand our sense of emplacement within the universe by talking about Pashupati. And we often think of that image of Shiva surrounded with so many animals. The Pashupati seal, all the way back to the Indus Valley, shows the yogi, shows the person of stabilized awareness, Staneshvara, if you will, standing in the presence of the Lord, in that idiom of ahimsa, in that idiom where animals lose their fear and they come around and they teach us. Now, I have no idea if this will be explored by Professor Timilsina tonight, but that's what I'm configuring here. By way of introduction, he is Professor of Religious Studies at San Diego State University. He is the author of many important books, including this book, which is called Seeing and Appearance, based upon his dissertation. And he is a renowned expert on the traditions of Tantra. He founded the Department of Tantric Studies at Kathmandu University. He holds the Acharya degree from Benares Hindu University. He also is the holder of a PhD from Halle University in Germany. And during those wonderful years of really the 90s and the O's, when people were discovering Tantra in new ways, where did they go other than to the Department of Tantric Studies at Kathmandu University? And so many of the luminaries in the field, including David Gordon White, including Jeff Lidke, including Walter Slahe of the University of Halle, studied with Professor Timilsina and learned so much of what can be known. And what he will share with us today is something a little bit near and dear, because his wife's brother brought me on a walking tour of Kathmandu. We were walking for 6 hours, and we came to a wonderful place where we saw the Pashupati temple. We were drenched. There was an unseasonable rainstorm, and we were completely drenched and completely given over to that magical world, that intersection of all things Buddhist as well as all of things Hindu, that is the country of Nepal, the birthplace of Professor Timilsina. So welcome to you all, and special pranams and welcome to Staneshwar.
So, may I start?
Please do.
Thank you, Professor Christopher Chappell. He has so much of praise because, he loves me. So you have to, a little bit, I think, take only few of those. I don't think I'm worthy of such praise. Today, I would like to take you to a journey of the world of the Pashupatas. And it should help us contextualize some of the archaic practices. For example, people you see living in cremation grounds, smeared with ashes, and not looking for achieving anything worldly. And what type of renouncement is that? What type of spiritual seeking are they doing? So for that, I would like to start with a verse which is kind of recited among the Pandit circle, like fun. Aishwarya madamattosi mam avagyaya tishtase upasthitesu bauddhesu madadhina tavasthiti. One of the most prominent Pashupata Acharya named Udayana Acharya, you will know him as a Nyaya philosopher, but he was a very thorough Pashupata. He goes to see Lord Mahakala, and it was off time, and the gates were closed. And he shouts from the gate, Aishwarya Mada Mattosi, you are drunken in your divine glory. Mam avagyaya tishtase, you sit inside there ignoring me. Upasthitesu bauddhesu, wait till when the Buddhists come. Madadhina tavasthiti, you will depend on me. It's a kind of, we think, like a joke. He's playing with God, but he was, by the way, the author of several Nyaya books, including Atma Tattva Viveka, which is one of the most systematic criticism of the Buddhist momentariness and Vijnana, momentary consciousness theories. So when we think of the Pashupatas, the first thing comes to our mind is maybe semi-literate ass smearing, cremation ground dwelling, ghoulish looking beings who laugh and cry and say whatever doesn't make sense, and then you are immediately thinking that this may be a sect of the least educated type. So I had to tell you beforehand that Nyaya philosophy, not just Udayana, another prominent philosopher, Bhasarvagnya, or even the guy who wrote the Nyayavartika, Udyotakara, they all are through and through Pashupatas. And I'm not even counting acharyas like Abhinavagupta. So it presents to us a dilemma. When you read the foremost text, Pashupata Sutra, with the Kaundinya's commentary, if you have already read it, you will have a different impression about the Pashupatas. So how to adjust this type of life of the philosophers and the layman practitioners? So we have to go then to accept that there are many types of Pashupatas. Huansang, one of the early travelers from China to India to learn Buddhism, reports that there were 10,000 Pashupatas in Benares in his time. And he reports of Pashupatas from Gandhar, like modern-day Kandahar, to Madhya Pradesh, to all areas. So they were one of the most prominent sects in that time. And around 5th, 6th, 7th centuries inscriptions, if you look into those inscriptions from Nepal also, we see Munda Shrinkhalika, like a skull-carrying type, and Shrinkhalika, those wearing the chains, those type of Pashupatas living in the Pashupati area. So it may be of interest because many of you are interested maybe in yoga, but not necessarily on Pashupatas. Because, you know, when you think of yoga, you think of Patanjali or Buddhism, various forms. And if I dare say the precursors for all forms of yoga are the Pashupatas. And for that, you will have to be pressed to go and read literature. And literary history is not going to be sufficient, and you will have to explore other forms of like archaeological evidence, and then it may take you really the proto-history of yoga. And it is not just for historical reasons, though, because around the end of today's conversation, I would like to draw your attention to how the Pashupata vows are absolutely relevant and contextual in our times. And many of the vows are common vows, whether Patanjalian or Buddhist vows, and they are, let's call them universal vows. But there are some very specific, only to Pashupata type vows. And I think we can learn, even in our times today, something meaningful from those archaic practices and those practitioners. And even if we may not be able to whole scale apply those practices in our life, we may be able to borrow some insights and have some significance in enriching our own lives. That allow me to start with some examples. There is on text. From Jangambari, they have this Pashupata Tantra that kind of categorizes Pashupatas to be Anadi Shaiva, Adi Shaiva, Maha Shaiva, Anu Shaiva, Avantara Shaiva, Avara Shaiva, Anantara Shaiva. Many Shaiva, at least 7 different schools of Shaivas we see there. And these Shaivas have actually varied forms of practices, like the Anadi Shaivas having the absolute Brahman as the only basis and nothing else to practice, to stay, to abide, to dwell in that absolute practice. And then some others who are only focused on the 5-letter mantra, Om Namah Shivaya, and that's it, nothing else to carry or contemplate upon. And then there are Mahashaivas who focus on 5 faces of Lord Shiva. Professor Chappell mentioned to you of Pashupati, that is the form of Sadashiva, that is the form that is worshipped there in the shrine of Pashupati, that is viewed the 5th or the highest form as the absolute, formless Nirguna, whereas the 4 faces in 4 directions are assigned as Tatpurusha, Vamadeva, Aghora, Sadyojata in different phases. If you read the Pashupata Sutras, the entire text is actually surrounded upon the practices of these 5 phases and 5 mantras. So fundamentally, what constitutes the Pashupata Bhav in this Mahashaiva is the recitation of these 5 mantras, visualization of 5 forms of Lord Shiva, and then many of the observances go after that. And there are some venerating Parada or Mercury Linga, they were Raseshwara, even in Shankara's Advaita Vedanta, it is like the genealogy traced is that the teacher of Shankaracharya was Govinda Bhagavad Pada, who was an alchemist and a foremost sadhaka of alchemy. And all the alchemists, by the way, worship Parada lingam made of mercury. And there are others who draw the mandalas and others who do not draw mandala, but have various forms of decorations. In the philosophical discourses, like if you see Brahma Sutra, the commentaries of Shankaracharya and other acharyas, we encounter 4 different schools of the Shaivas: the Shaiva, Pashupata, Karunika, and Kapala. In the Pashupata Tantra, they divide 4 types of Pashupatas. One is the Vama, the left hand, where there is a primacy of the goddess. That is why they are called Vama, for nothing wrong, but just for worshipping goddess as the primary divinity. And Dakshina, the right hand, is not necessarily right hand. The southern face of practice is of Aghora, therefore they are the Bhairava worshippers. And then others are Mishra, the mixed one, who worship 7 mothers or various goddesses, and then the Siddhantas. So Veerashaivas claim to be the follower of these Siddhantas. So this is just a very brief account of what the Pashupatas are, historically different sects. What do they practice and what is the meaning to begin with? What does it even mean to say Pashupata? You have Pashu and Pati, and then one who follows the system of Pashupati is the Pashupata. Pashu is a beast and Pati is the Lord. You can say beast master, the Lord of the beast. But what is beast here? Pashyanat, Pasanat, Pashu. Pashu is derived of the root, all the Sanskrit words can be derived of the verb. We have to go look into the verbal base for the meaning. So Pashyanat, one who looks out, observes things, has concepts, delimited knowledge. Pasanat, one who has snares, ties, ropes, who is tied. So that is the second meaning that most people understand. Pashu, it has nothing to do with animals. It is about being tied, being ensnared. So Pashus are all those who are ensnared. What are those snares? 3 fundamental snares, always a 3 guna. It is not the 3 guna of the Sankhyas, but it is the raga, dvesha, and moha, attachment or passion, aversion, and then delusion. These fundamental things tie us, and these are the pashas. And anyone who has this overt expression of passion or hatred, or people who hate others, anything, they have these bondage, ties, and they are Pashu. And Pati is the one who is permanently liberated from these pashas. And about the Pashupatas, they are also pati, like a sama bhuyaha pati samaha paraha. So will be equal to pati, the master, when they free themselves from these pashas. If you read Sayanacharya's Sarvadarsana Sangraha, Sayana Madhava's Madhavacharya Sarvadarsana Sangraha, you will find the Grina, Shanka, Bhayam, Lajja, Jugupsha, Cheti Panchami, Kulam, Shilam, Tatha Jatiti, Ashtau Pashaha Prakritita, Pasha, Basa. What are these 8 pashas? You have these, the sense of disgust, doubt, fear, shame, envy. You have these entitlements of the belonging to a particular family, clan, caste. Shila, you are a pious person, you are a holy man, and you are born in a superior caste. These, the Pashupatas thought, are the fundamental ties that as long as you are thinking that you are Brahmin and therefore you are superior to others, liberation is not possible for you. Or vice versa, if you think that you are born in another race and you may not belong to Pashupati, then you do not belong to Pashupati just for the same reason, because you constructed yourself, your identity, to be determined by your genes. And you have all these other forms, like the sense of disgust and sense of modesty, like not having, like a shame. I will come back to these particular things in the last part of my conversation with you. I just want to go with the particular terms that we find in Kaundinya's commentary: kama, the sexual desire; krodha, anger; lobha, greed; bhaya, fear; swapna, sleeping, slumber; raga, passion; dvesha, aversion; and moha, delusion. These are, for Kaundinya, these are the pashas. And as long as you do not confront these snares, you are tied to the world. You have not been able to free yourself from bestial nature. So for the Pashupatas, there literally is no separate status for human beings and the animals. I would like to add a little bit of a memoir here. My guru, my teacher, Prem Chetan Brahmachari, who taught me many forms of yoga, he had one habit. He would let the door on, and if you know Nepal, India, there are all these street dogs. They just like to sneak in, and there would be dogs inside his room. And then he would have some people visiting, and they would bring biscuits, not the dog biscuits like here, but these Parle-G type biscuits there. and then there are like these students like me, and then he would just love to feed us, tossing the biscuits, like giving one piece to one dog, another piece to another dog, and another piece to, and then any student who had an issue or who would little hesitate to receive prasada that way, he would never be allowed to get into that room again. You have too much ego, and you do not belong to my school, so I cannot accept you as my student because you think you are better than a dog. And if you so the way, it's very outrageous. I hope you cannot understand this, because you in the Western cultures, dogs have somehow better status than many human beings here. We love our dogs more than we love some neighbors who do not look like us. So I'm sorry, I'm a little sarcastic there, but that's also the fact there. But in India or Nepal, dogs are the poor creatures abused all along. And to make you willing that if you want to be a student, you have to be willing to let your ego be equal to that of a street dog. That is like the first vow, not the second or the third kind of thing. That's not like the later on test. That's like the beginning test. Oh, this man, he is not for my class. I don't want him again. That's as simple as that. Just I went off the script for that example. I wanted you guys to have a little bit of sense of what does it feel like to be with the Pashupata acharyas. These Pashupatas do not like a niyama. I mean, although they are yogis, in the yoga, you have yama and niyama. And when you say of niyama, they have renounced, and the niyama is injunction, and they do not like these injunctions. They are not tied because niyamas tie. But most of the things what we consider niyama are included within yama, the rules. And what they say is you cannot abandon yamas up till your life, as long as you have your body. So what are those? You have mostly the same thing of ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, that is given there, or krodha, not having anger, guru susrusa, to serve your teacher, purity, ahara lagava, do not eat too much, and apramada, do not be lazy. So these are they consider yama itself. The whole thing falls under yama, and they consider 10 basically routine things you have to observe. And the first and foremost, as you can see, these Pashupatas, you are not going to be surprised if I say they love animals, and they love, of course, ahimsa. So the fundamental vow of the Pashupatas is the vow of ahimsa. So they view himsa can happen in 3 different ways. One is to inflict pain on others. Dukkha utpadana, that is to inflict pain. And that happens through what? Through some psychological games, by verbal accusations, or in attacking someone physically. And the next term they have is andavedana. That is a technical term. It relates to where you might be killing insects or the eggs. So Pashupata acharyas are not allowed to touch fire. They are not allowed to start fire. So Agni Jwalanam is not allowed. And then Prana Nirmochanam, just then the last type of violence is, killing someone. So therefore, what you see, if you have studied Buddhist vows of the monks, they do Chaturmasa, 4 months, not strolling, and you think that the monks want to just sit in a place when it rains a lot. Of course, that makes sense, because when it is raining, it may be difficult to travel. But for the Pashupata vows, it is very clear, and most likely that was the same case for the Buddhist also, because what they say, during the rain, there are all the insects, and all the animals crawling, creeping, and you will be unintentionally killing them. So you are not supposed to travel around during the rainy monsoon seasons. So, and then 2 things that are absolutely forbidden for the Pashupatas. One is Kraya Vikraya, another is Raja Purusha Samsarga. Let me explain what this means. Kraya Vikraya is a business. You cannot trade anything. Like for the Buddhist monks, trading is allowed. The Jains, many of the Jains, except for the monks, trading is allowed, but it doesn't matter. It is because it will create, if you have been in any trading thing in your life, you will know that once you start trading, you will have a motive of profiting, and you will trade the things that you can make money of, not the things that people benefit or people want from you. That is absolute sin for a Pashupata to trade things. And Rajapurusha Samsarga, to come to contact with a political person. I can go 5 hours on this. And I have been contaminated many times, because it is so difficult to know. You can save yourself from the illusion of Lord Vishnu, but you cannot save yourself from the illusion of the political leaders, because they make you believe that they are there for you. And you somehow think that you have no other way around. You need somebody. So Raja Purusha Samsarga is absolute sin from the Pashupata perspective, because there are no good politicians. And you cannot affiliate to any political leader, because it comes alongside violence. It's just a systematic institutionalization in order to reduce local forms of violence, so that the state takes control of violence, so the state can perpetrate violence. It is not a negation of violence. No state can absolutely negate violence. So therefore, Shaiva Acharyas, Pashupatas have to stay away from two things. One is doing business. You can come in contact with business people, most likely because they can help you survive too. But anyway, the text do not say, do not ever come to contact with business people. It only says, do not do business. And business people will like it. If you are a monk and you start trading, then why should they love you, But with regard to politics, it does not say don't do politics. It says you cannot come in contact there. So there is no caste system in Pashupatas. As you can see, there is no untouchable in the caste-wise thing. But if there is a real untouchable, then that is the political people. They are the untouchables. And because they will roast your mind, they will ruin your mind. They are very clever, and we as people who are practicing these vows cannot always safeguard those vows, and you will never even know when you are misled and are made to do wrong things. So the Kaundinya Bhashya, the commentary of Kaundinya, is very explicit about these, and these were the basic things about the vows. So now I will just give you a little bit of how the yoga works here. One is looking for absolute purity in the mind, akalusha mate, that is one sutra. Charata, wandering, you have to keep wandering. Tato asya yoga pravartate, and then you will have the yoga to activate or to begin. You will be doing yoga. What is yoga in this sense is Atma Ishvara Samyogo Yoga. And I have to step one, take one more step further in this context to make a claim that the Ishvara is not some like in the modern day, it is considered a secular term for the Hindus, because they say, because every god is a Brahma, Vishnu, Durga, Devi, whatever, and then Ishvara is a generic term for whatever the god, and that is the kind of story that we are told. But if you read the classical text, you will find that consistently the term Ishvara is used to designate Shiva. and show me that Ishvara term is used to designate any of the other Hindu gods. So these Pashupatas have survived in many forms, including in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra in the form of Ishvara. And what about Nyaya? I already told you that that is the logic school of the Pashupatas. So broadly speaking, a little bit exaggeration, but most of the acharyas hail from the Pashupata tradition. So now, Atma Ishvara Samyoga. Now, what is the difference here in compared to Patanjali is there is no samyoga, actually union. The primary meaning of yoga would have been the union. But if you read Patanjali, then yoga chitta vritti nirodha, I mean, what is the union there? Okay. Asampragyata, where is the union there? So, and then you are independent self and Ishvara is independent self. Where is the union there? So, and then yoga has samadhi, then you will read Yujir Samadhi from another verbal root, because when you do not have a direct route, then you take a long way, and then that is how you justify. But in here, the yoga originally comes in the sense of the union. And then this is a very explicit in terms of 26 categories. Ishvara, Kaundinya says Ishvara is the 26th category, and he outlines in the commentary the Sankhyan 25 categories. But what is the relationship between the Purusha, the individual self, with Ishvara, the Supreme Lord? Then he gives a good example of haridra, what you call that, turmeric and water. If you put a lot of turmeric in water, it will be yellow, and then now you cannot separate which part is turmeric and which part is water, or let's say salt. They use the turmeric because you can see. In salt you have to taste, but the example is the same. So the union is like that. So it just adds some quality in their absolute sense. So haridrodaka, the example goes like that. And how do you go into, now this is where we have to explore the practices as prescribed. That's the last part of the conversation, that how do they actually apply the practices. Natakavad acharan acharati. So the Pashupata Acharya, the follower, acharati, follows the conduct like a drama. So it's as if an act going on rather than absolutely following that. He is isolating himself. The first, in the beginning course of practice at least, he isolates himself to establish his practice. And then he meditates on Om in the heart, Omkaram Abhidyayita, Riddhi Kurvita Dharana. This is in the Pashupata Sutra. Now, with these practices, what he does actually is the Pashupata Acharya, the master, when he thinks that now he has achieved, like he is firm in his practice, now he comes to the public and he starts teaching. No, he comes to the public. And then let me read a couple of the examples. Paresham unmatta sadrisha daridra purusha snata mala digdhangena rudasmasru nakaroma dharina sarva sanskara varjitena bhavitavyam. One should look really disgusting, and one should look mad, look really poor with all the past clothes, and then should sometimes smear the feces to smell really bad, and should leave these beard and hair all going crazy with the nails and everything. Apitat kuryat, apitat bhased, yena paribhavam gachet. Do what you have to do, say what you have to say, so that you can be abused or you can be insulted by the people. Why should you do that? Paribhuya mano hi vidwan kritsna tapa bhavati. Only when you are insulted by the public, then you become pure, you achieve your tapas. What is the highest form of yantra, limitations of the body? Asanmano hi yantradam sarvesham uttama smritaha. The highest form of all the yantras, delimiting factors, is asanmana, to have no respect, to have no dignity. Now, this is where I want to come to contextualize this. What is going on? Why should you be insulted by the world? Why should you seek? The text goes, if you see some women, you talk things or just do something that the public thinks that you are a really horrible monk, that you are trying to seduce someone. So let them beat you up and let them talk bad about you. Now, I want to come to our modern reality. We are obsessed about our subjectivity. Since childhood, particularly modern Western culture, I was talking to a little girl, only 7 years old, in the lunch in my friend's house. I just randomly asked, when you grow up, what do you want to be? And she said, I want to be a neurosurgeon. That was very shocking to me because a 7-year girl, I didn't even expect her to know the word neurosurgeon. But why do you want to be a neurosurgeon? Because they make a lot of money. This is our modern reality. I know this girl now enjoying college life. I wish her the best. Will have a lot of money. I do not doubt it. And I wish she doesn't have to feel the lack that has been created since the beginning. And this is just a disease. I'm not talking about an individual. I'm talking about the collective, that how we have shaped our civilization today as a collective of the egos, the collective of unsatisfied, I call them hungry ghosts, because we are made to look the world around us, prince and princesses. Since our childhood, we are important. Our birthdays mean bigger than any religious festivities. That is the main celebration of a year. That is our own birthday. Okay, and we actively endorse that to our children to make them feel that they are the center of attention. What is this subjectivity? From the Pashupata perspective, purely Pashupata perspective, there are two things from the Pashupata perspective. One is our subjectivity, and the another, the Atman. That Atman is Ishvara. Whatever is left is Ishvara. You are not negating that Ishvara as the basis. It is not a dependent origination of the Buddhist either, because this subjectivity needs to be wiped clean but that doesn't mean the other is also contingent upon me or dependent upon me. The other is Ishvara. You may not know. When you think I am, when you think yourself in the form of I, that is your problem. But from my perspective, you are God. And what makes me not see that is my own subjectivity. So the taboo, the real taboo, is that of our ego. And that is constituted in our social interaction. And let me categorize, like go one by one, like what they called the pashas in this text. I can analyze a few of them from Vidyaranya's. Grina, disgust. You know, the sense of disgust is an intersubjective emotion. We cultivate that sense, we develop, this is an acquired feeling, acquired emotion. Doubt. We teach our children, we cannot feel safe. We tell nonsense and they start doubting. And if you cannot doubt what you are being told, you will be a loser. You cannot fit in society. You have to, now, you know, there is no media actually that I am willing to take for a face value. I am thrown into the world of doubt. I have no escape from doubting because my intersubjective self, my ego, is made of disgust, made of doubt and fear. I'm given things to fear. Forget about the wild beast for us to fear. What are the most fearsome beasts are the humans for other humans. And even more fearsome than humans are the human ideas. Such dangerous, we are the placeholder. We contain the thoughts, such vicious, such dangerous. And modesty, like when you have the sense of shame, it is unbelievable. And I know there are these hygienic arguments, don't give me that. I was hanging out with another person, a Shaiva Acharya, who practiced Agorapath. I didn't go learn much, but my teacher made a condition that I have to also learn some of the things, at least have a little bit of exposure to what they do, even if not practice. So I'm sitting next to Vasudev Agori, that was his name. And then he just would make tea and then, you know, serve tea to whoever comes. And people are coming and going, and he doesn't know the idea of cleaning the cups. So, you know, you may have a little hesitation. I have tremendous hesitation to just drink on the cup, like the tea that was used by others. But then what happens is, like, I was like served tea, and then I look at it, and then it has a thick, dark layer, something that does look like maybe leaves of tea leaves. And I thought maybe he didn't filter it. And then I was just looking at it, and more closely, I realized that they were all dead flies, because they put a lot of sugar, you know, and then when you pour tea, and then somebody drinks from that cup and then leaves, and then there's still, it's very sweet, and maybe 10, 20, 50 flies come and, you know, gather there. And then when he pours another batch of tea, flies die, and then it continues, you know, and the cup is being filled. And I managed to sneak out, just like, you know, not make him notice I hadn't drunk his tea. After 10 minutes or so, he notices it. Why didn't you drink your tea? Now I know I'm going to be kicked out. And then I'm just like reluctantly show it to him, the cup. He's very willing to see. Maharaj, can you see? And then he looks with big eyes, he looks at that. there are flies, dead flies. And he said, no surprise, no shock, nothing, no feeling. Yeah, no, I can't eat flies. Okay. And then he just takes all the flies, eats them. And then asks me, can you check if there are flies left? No, there are no flies. Now drink it. No, I can't drink from this like fly soup. I can't. But now he says, but I already ate the flies for you because I understand you didn't want to eat the flies. And so I ate for you. Of course, if we set aside the sense of disgust, the hygienic issue, there is a bigger psychological rather than physical issue. I'm interested in the psychological issue. By the way, this man had a PhD in physics and he was professor in Calcutta University for about a decade. And then he decided to give up everything and became an Aghori. And I didn't know any of those, that life of him, till one physicist from Kathmandu just went there and then he started saying, you are disgusting, stupid guy, you have no reason, no rationality. And then he wrote one lengthy equation on the board and asked him to solve that. And then this best physicist could not solve, and he wrote the whole thing down. And then, do you agree with me? Do you agree with me? The next step he's showing. And then, yeah. And then at the end, when he said, and then he says, you don't deserve my teaching, so just go. And so some of these people we think are a different category, uneducated, illiterate. That was my perception, that is because I'm a Pandit, and I love scholarship. And I no matter, even when I'm going and kind of sort of trying to at least observe, even if not practice those things, what I did not expect was that these people had work not coming from what I thought like very illiterate background, and therefore they didn't know anything better. Actually, many of these, I met some other Aghoris too, really, either good artists or, like having tremendous education, and something just cracks in and then they are willing. So now going back to the original point I was trying to make for today's conversation, what would happen to us if we were to let go of our subjectivity? If we were to how do we start to even work on that? Is like, if the world does not move around me, would that even be a world for us anymore? As a matter of fact, the world does not move around us. And that, I think, would be relieving. But the second point, immediately, it takes us to question the centrality of our ego in social transaction. And you can see how we are not able to have any meaningful communication with another subject because our ego blocks the potential to that opening in which we could be having a sort of a union of the heart, or we may be willing to listen to the other. Are these Pashupatas completely able to wipe clean of their subjectivity? What is mukti? What is moksha? Moksha is the absolute goal in which your individuated ego is erased. You do not mean anything to yourself. You do not want yourself to mean something for others. It is not about being a great Siddha. It is not being any title to get from the social. It is not about earning social recognition. I know that the kind of argument I'm making is counterintuitive because today is the day of identity politics. We have to make our identity, or we are lost, And but what if, how far, if humanity, I sometimes worry if we have even 20 years of civilization left. But let's not be pessimistic. Let's be optimistic and say we have thousands and millions of years to go. How far this egocentrism. And there are two types of egocentrisms. One is the individuated ego and the collective sense of the ego, which is even more dangerous. That is where the tribal ego comes to play. That is why kulam shilam tatha jati, that this is my family, this is my birth, I am an American, I come from great nation, I'm a Nepalese, like you ask, it's just funny. Every country, man has something told, educated since childhood to be proud of. And when we are bereft of something good that is intrinsic to us, we affiliate ourselves with these external impositions, and we start identifying ourselves with those external attributes, and they become our adornment. They delimit us, they qualify us, they explain, they become our identity. And you can't say I'm a man of earth. What is the big thing about that? Because that does not help you separate some others. But tomorrow, if we are working with the Martians and others, then we can use that category. Then, because then you can clearly see it has nothing to do about identifying us. It has only to do about demeaning others, to show how they are smaller than us. And to erase this ego, to wipe clean of this ego, is the only or the central most point of the Pashupata vows. They do the 5 mantras, that is very common, or they keep reciting Om Namah Shiva, that is very common. That does not make a difference, because those practices are everywhere there. You can find this ahimsa everywhere there. But the centrality of deconstructing our everyday ego. And what happens when you deconstruct everyday ego, the Buddha would say, the Buddhist would say, then there is emptiness. There is absolutely nothing left, or this is the ego and the other is like a codependent arising. These Pashupatas are not saying that. Your ego is codependent arising. That's it. Your ego arises being dependent on what the society imposes on you, and your self-centrality is arising independent. There is nothing absolute as your subject, your ego. When you wipe that clean, you are Pati, you are the Lord, you are Shiva, and you are not willing to let go of that ego. Therefore, you are not going to experience yourself as Pati, the Lord. To work through this ego is what I believe is the central practice. If you read the Pashupata Sutras and the commentaries, read in light of the comment I just made, that it is working towards erasing our individuated ego, our subjectivity that is construed in our social interaction. And how do you deconstruct that? Is by allowing the other to demean you, to make you. Then finally, I'll come to last point, and then as long as Professor Chappell allows, I'm happy to answer your questions. I'm here for you. So the last point is about, what about the arrogance of Udayana, that, hey, God, you'll need me. That is also very much arrogant thing to say. How can you expect one acharya to say something like that? Of course, that's a little joke too, but in serious note, the most difficult thing for a Pashupata acharya is to accept to be a teacher. Because you have to cultivate the ego of the teacher without actually allowing the cultivation of the ego as a teacher or anything else. there is a requirement of this cultivation so that the truth, the absolute, continues being manifest in the human realm. So the teaching is possible, but if that ego starts sucking our life juices, our wisdom, and we become the professor. I know some friends just made a joke about doctors. You know, I'm sure like many of us are the victims of that you get like a PhD and then you start introducing yourself, you know, like everywhere, Dr. Timalsina, Dr. such and so. What is wrong with you? I'm serious. I mean, other people who earn similar degrees do not go on bragging. Or just, I mean, master's degree maybe one step low, but I mean, it's still great. I haven't met people master such and so, you know, I'm master Timal Sinha. I don't hear people saying that. So this teacherly ego is also something for anybody who is in teacherly world. That is something for us to watch, and that we cannot let this ego to define ourselves, because we on top of what the rest of the world is do not exist, and this is just a projection of subjectivity. And that projection of subjectivity might have some requirement for social transaction, but it cannot serve anything ultimate. It doesn't have any ultimate purpose. And therefore, we have to consciously work towards the erasure of this ego. And how the Pashupata saw that is possible is by allowing others to help us deconstruct who we believe we are. Thank you so much. I welcome you to ask questions.
Thank you, Professor Timalsina. And none of us will forget about that teacup and those flies and the wonderment that's inspired in the presence of such individuals is just so precious. And it reminded me, I had an assignment once to bring a gift to Garmasisi Chang, and I had to drive several hundred miles to do this. And Garmasisi Chang was a translator of Tibetan works into English, prolific, brilliant, was a professor at Penn State University in the middle of the state of Pennsylvania. And he was being very kind, and he asked one thing or another of my wife and I. And we were all of 20 years old and very committed to our yoga practice. And it happened to have been at the end of a very fine summer when I was only working 20 hours a week, and I was able to do extended sadhana and meditation. And I was explaining this to him. And he said, "Oh, too much." And he went over and he opened the refrigerator and he said, "Have a yogurt." And again, it was this very skillful way of disassembling any sense of identity. And that humility that we find with the Pashupatas is just, it lifts us up with humor, and it lifts us up because it takes us out of this thing that we think that we are, whatever that thing may be. So thank you. That was just so wonderful. And please, any questions of any sort. It can be a very simple question. It can be a very sophisticated question.
I think
so. Chris Miser, yeah, Chris first.
Thanks. Yeah, good to see you, Acharya. Um, I I have a pretty simple question. I know that for me, I can see a lot of these opportunities arise all the time in our lives, you know. It's just you run up against it all the time because we have these egos. So I wondered though, is there something you do? Is there some process you do which helps ease with that inner tension that arises? Because I notice when my ego is challenged, I'm good at recognizing it, but then the next step is how do I deal with this inner angst that I feel
Mhm.
sometimes?
You have to observe on two different fronts. One is learning philosophy. I know in the modern sense, learning philosophy, I don't know what the purpose is. I'm talking about darshanas, because they help us to confront our true identity and then take us back to what our essential or intrinsic nature is. And when the more we study these shastras, the less we are likely to have uncritical thoughts, because we develop a habit of critical examination of thoughts that becomes like automatic. And then the second thing is observation or meditation practices. And ultimately, what these things you can see, the witness practice are going to some pragyata forms of dharana. It doesn't matter what, but it allows us to have the thoughts in our mind to watch them, like we are seeing people walking or cars running in the street, and it allows us, the more we develop the skill, it allows us to see before the thoughts are formed in a particular way, what type of thoughts, like if you are seeing from a distance, you can, if you are watching, the vehicles coming and going, you can start guessing if that's going to be a truck or that's going to be SUV or that's going to be a car. The same way, the thoughts start coagulating, taking shape, and the meditative practices for me are meant to help us see the thoughts before they coagulate, before they take shape. And these practices we call to achieve by means of sutra. These are like the philosophical text, and tantra, those are the mantric practices with the mandala visualizations. But that is not the only thing out there. I'm just telling you, since you asked how do I do it, that's how I do it. And have I mastered it? No way.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and you reminded me too that there's a meditative practice I can do where I just look at that feeling of tension, and instead of interpreting it as being meaning this thing or meaning that thing, I can just be with the feelings too.
Sometimes we may need to do both. I mean, yeah, the
Okay.
observation is highly praised. All the gurus have taught of this, but why are we having a particular, like just watch them? It's easy in a sense to say, and even to watch is not as difficult as to deal with them. Why are you having a repeated thought of drinking water? Because you are thirsty. Just accept it. Just go drink some water and you will not have a repeated thought. So some of the thoughts, I know that a person got very angry because I was listening to him sharing some violent thoughts. If you go to people, community, political type, particularly, at the end is how to justify violence. And say, if you feel that way, why don't you just go and kill somebody and then see what happens? I'm not endorsing killing, but I think when people strongly feel the urge, I think they should act on it. I know it is a bad thing to say, But they will go to jail or whatever, and at least they don't have to be reborn with that same tendency and eventually do the thing which they want to do now. At least their journey in this misery will be shorter if they act on it. So I'm not saying therefore whatever thoughts come to act on it, but if you analyze them, maybe some of the thoughts will feel so silly, and then no, I am no way going to act on it, and then they will be resolved.
Right. Thank
Particularly
you.
violent thoughts have that nature. When you get angry, do I want to go and beat him up? No, I don't want to. Then I don't want to be angry anymore. Because if I'm not ready to act on it, what is the point of thinking about it? Yes.
Thank you.
I have a question about the timeline that that you've kind of alluded to. Are the Pashupatas from almost like a primordial time before Hindus and Jains and Buddhists separated into distinct paths? Because the fact of the Nyaya philosophy coming from that, and the part of it is that the ground of ahimsa goes across all the different paths, and the description that you gave of how they have to be to not kill bugs and to not ingest them, that's very Jain. So is this a really old path? That's my question.
Could be. Unfortunately, I do not work on history. I'm a textualist, but I would try my best to respond to your question. And if we read the earliest, besides the archaeological facts, besides what we can find in the uniforms and, like these tablets and things like that. So the earliest, the textual thing we can go is the Vedic text, and nobody doubts that they are before the time of the Buddha, and they predate any existing Jaina texts. So in the Vedas, we find two different tendencies. The early Vedic references are very skeptical about vratyas, the people who wander around and who are not accepting yajna ritual paradigm and accepting household norms. And who are these vratyas? That is a question there. And then looks like one of the abusive terms used to designate these people is Shishna Deva, those who worship Shishna, which would be phallus or penis, as worshipping as God. Now you can see that Shiva Linga, if someone from outside the culture were to find a derogatory term, then you can definitely say Shishna Deva, these people who worship Shiva Linga, the Linga. So those references appear from the way the vratyas are meant to be purified if they ever want to come to live a normal life, or the abuse you can see in terms of Shishna Deva, to me suggests the early Pashupatas. And then you can see a shifting tendency in the Vedas itself, because Taittiriya Aranyaka, the 5 mantras that provide the foundation for the Pashupata practices, or the Rudram that is in the Yajurveda, both in Shukla and Krishna variations, slightly different, but the Rudram chapter is very significant. So there have been tremendous research already done on early Rudra Shiva, and I'm not even going deep into any of those works, historical works. I'm just giving you some cues to go further, that yes, in the earliest texts, before the time of the Buddha or Mahavira at least, we do find these vratyas, and we do find the people worshiping linga, and then we can go, now you can go to the archaeological evidence of when and where the phallic forms are worshipped, and you are going to be shocked that, yeah, it just seems like at one point people had this as a central form of practice. It was very ancient. And then maybe in light of these things, we may be able to connect that it may not be far-fetched that the whatever Mohenjo-daro, Harappa's seals we are talking about are identified as Pashupati. Maybe not like that is the Pashupati. Maybe those were some of those early mendicants meditating in jungle surrounded by animals. Thank you.
Well, I'm wondering, Staneshwar, if you might be able to share with us a chant of some sort as we close out the evening.
Okay, so then I will, generally these mantras are, more in the ritual context, but I will do it anyway because we discussed. So let's consider this as a worship because it has been a ritual. There is a priest, there is a jajamana. So priest, I am the priest, Professor Chapel hired, so then I will end with the chant. Om Sadyo Jatam Prapadyami Sadyo Jataya Vai Namaha Bhave Bhave Nati Bhave Bhavaswamam Bhavad Bhavaya Namaha Om Vamadevaya Namo Jeshthaya Namaha Shreshthaya Namo Rudraya Namaha Kalaya Namaha Kalavikarnaya Namo Balavikarnaya Namo Balaya Namo Balapramathanaya Namaha Sarva Bhuta Damanaya Namo Mananmanaya Namaha Om Aghorebhyo Atha Ghorebhyo Ghora Ghoratarevyaha Sarvebhyah Sarva Sarvebhyo Namaste Astu Rudrarupebhyah Om Tat Purushaya Vidmahe Mahadevaya Dhimahi Tanno Rudrah Prachodayate Om Ishana Sarva Vidyanam Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam Brahmadhipatir Brahmanodhipatir Brahma Shivo Me Astu Sada Shivo.
Well, thank you all. It's been a delightful evening to reflect on these people from long ago who are still in our midst and who remind us that